So in the previous section that you saw how enzymes were working on the substrate to form products. However, enzymes always need certain other molecules that help them assist in these reactions, and these are called as cofactors, or sometimes they're also called as coenzymes. So cofactors or coenzymes are accessory molecules that are needed to help an enzyme completely pass its reaction. Now these cofactors or coenzymes can be metals or some larger molecule. For example, iron is a cofactor, and so are vitamins of all different sorts. A metabolic pathway is a very broad term. In a metabolic pathway, various substrates can be converted from one form of substance to the other. Sometimes a metabolic pathway can consist of a series of reactions in which the first a reaction's product can be the starting substance for the second reaction, and so forth. Each of these reactions are controlled by their own enzyme. So there are in a reaction that is 10 steps, there are going to be 10 different enzymes that can be assisting each step of the reaction. We will thoroughly look at two different reactions or the metabolic processes in the coming two weeks. One is respiration and one is photosynthesis, and you will find that how long each of the step is and how many tremendous amount of molecules are required, and how energy is being used to start a substance, and what is the output of energy for both of them. So it will give you a good sense in the next 2 weeks as what are metabolic processes. The photosynthesis is the main biosynthetic pathway which is used by all the producers to form to form food, or glucose as we call the basic chemical molecule that is holding a tremendous amount of energy. And these producers are also termed as autotrophs. Auto means self, trophs self-sufficient. So they are able to self-supply their own food. And these autotrophs must have chloroplast present in them, and the chloroplast helps or is essential for the process of photosynthesis, which creates these organic compounds. And then these organic compounds are holding a lot of energy into them. That is the energy that is gathered from the sun. During the second process, which is the aerobic respiration, these organic molecules are broken down to release energy by the cell, and the waste that results is carbon dioxide and water. So we will be discussing both of them in a lot more depth in the next 2 weeks. Here's an example of degradative pathway, which means that it's a breakdown pathway. It's a pathway in which a larger molecule or a big molecule is broken down to smaller products. And in this particular example over here, glucose is the molecule, and we have at the very end the product at the end. But you can see it's like almost the image is showing over here is pretty much showing as bouncing of a ball. So here we have water at the end, and we can see on the top is glucose, and it releases carbon dioxide and hydrogen ions, and these hydrogen ions can then release a lot of energy. If this reaction was just carried out as one step, then a lot of the energy would be wasted. Think of dropping a ball from a 5-story building. Think of it that way. If you drop the ball from the top, it will have a heavier impact on the ground. However, if you drop the ball on a slope or during steps, it will have less of an impact that will be wasted. And that energy at each step that you see over here is actually stored in the form of ATP that we will see in the next couple of reactions in metabolic process of respiration. These reactions are all oxidative reductive reaction, which is a lot of electron transfer is used in this pattern. So you will hear the word electrons every time you see the word electrons being released. Think of it as going to carry on that energy to another molecule. Now we will, before we go into the metabolic process, we just want to go over a little review about how substances cross the membranes. Substances cross the membranes, whether they're plant or animal cells, by the three main processes. First one is diffusion. Second is passive transport, and the last is active transport. Passive transport is the most simplest to understand. It's like taking food color and dropping it in a glass of water. So you see the molecules dispersing and intermingling and uniformly and providing the color in water. That is diffusion. When you drop the crystal at one area, that is a concentrated area, and then it slowly starts traveling to the less concentrated area of the dye and eventually mixes with the water. That is diffusion. Same thing if you take a room spray and you spray it on one side of the room, the molecules will start traveling all over, and within a period of time you will smell a uniform scent. A passive transport is a means of transport in which certain help is required, some certain facilitation is required. So for example, in the first instance which you saw for diffusion was in the first diagram, and the second diagram shows over here the passive transport. You notice that there is seems like a gate or a chamber out there which helps the molecules to move across. And it might just be that the pores in the membranes are very small and they can't allow every molecule to go in, but certain molecules can pass through if they have a more clear passage, and this passage usually helps moving substances across a concentration gradient. What that may mean is that there might be more molecules on one side of the membrane, and that will be considered as a high concentration gradient. So these molecules over here, because there are lots of them, they're considered to be high concentrated area, and then this is a low concentration area, and molecules are moving in this way. That's similar to the case with diffusion. Diffusion also always moves molecules from high concentration to the lower concentration. However, active transport is the opposite, in which you actually are moving molecules from lower concentration towards the higher concentration, and this uphill movement, which is against the concentration gradient, requires energy. So this would be requiring a pump of some sort or some energy usage, which is usually in the form of ATP, that will help transport substances from one end of the membrane to the other. So let's look at diffusion in more depth, as an image shows you over here. You can see the ink drop being added to the water, and you can see how the molecule are being dispersing from an area of higher concentration to an area that has no, and eventually you have a uniform consistency. The diffusion rates are dependent on temperature. Usually increase in temperature will increase diffusion. The molecular size, which means if the smaller the particles, quicker they will be easy to usually move around and uniform the region. And other factors such as pressure, charge, and concentration of the molecule also has an effect. Which concentration of molecule would be if you have lots of different colors in a very little amount of water, it's going to influence the diffusion rate. Usually molecules such as oxygen and carbon dioxide and small nonpolar molecules will move through diffusion within the membrane. So carbon dioxide, oxygen, and small nonpolar molecules and some water molecules will cross the membrane through this pathway. Glucose, chloride ions, potassium ions, these will not cross the membrane through diffusion. Many particles or many solutes will pass through the membrane channels, and these membrane channels are called as the gated channels or open channels, and these are present in the bilipid layer, and they do not require energy, but they do facilitate the movement from higher concentration to the lower concentration within the membrane. And here's an example of active transport. Again, one of the examples is calcium ions, which is working against the concentration gradient. By working against the concentration gradient, we are looking at the pump over here. The calcium ions are less present in the inside of the membrane, and there's a higher concentration outside, and how the shape of the pump will change to push the ions across.